Welcome to the Geekscape book club, except no substitutes and no imitators. As always, I am Christian Bladt. Very excited to this time around. We'll be talking about the Creature Commandos, a trade paperback that I guess came out in 2014, but as luck would have it, was free on Amazon about a month ago. So everybody said yes because it's like, oh, I'll read it for free. Welcoming back to the show and to the network, my friend Jeff Winstead. Jeff, great to see you.
Good to see you, Christian.
And of course, creator, author, and I don't want to get the title of your book wrong, so please say it properly for me.
The Last Battle of the Revolution, Daniel Boone and the War for American Independence on the Kentucky Frontier.
So if you left it to me, I would have said Battle Hymn of the Republic. So obviously
right.
I would have
close enough. Battle
Rhyme
of the Republic.
And speaking of ancient, with us is, of course, my friend Eric Connor. We appreciate seeing you here on screen as Franken Connor, which
and I appreciate the reminding people of my age right up front. I think that's good. So thank you for that, Christian.
Because if they just look at you, they'd assume you were a tween heartthrob.
This is why Christian's one of the best.
You're the next Chalamet, as far as I'm concerned. But give it time. And of course, this show's favorite Brooklyn boy, David Brody. We're under a different umbrella. So you're this show's favorite Brooklyn boy.
Fantastic.
So
I'm every show's favorite Brooklyn boy. What are you talking about?
You're in the top 5. Steve Rogers is kind of always first.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then Jackie Robinson.
My dad was a Brooklyn boy, so
Gabe Kaplan, all the sweat hogs. You know what? We don't have time, Brody. We don't have time.
Fair enough.
So, Jeff, I always lean on you when I venture into what Marvel used to refer to as the distinguished competition. Anything that's older from DC, I feel like you're going to know a little bit more about than I do. Now, Eric and I last year on this program, as they say, had the privilege and honestly the honor to talk to J.M. DeMatteis about Kraven's Last Hunt, but I did also want to talk to him a little bit about Creature Commandos. So we got a little bit of the background from him, and it'll kind of be interesting as we follow their published career. But what was your understanding of the Creature Commandos? And they're from a time before you started collecting comics. But what did you know? What did you think of the characters? All that good stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to feign knowledge that I don't have here.
Sure.
So this is sort of like a side street of DC that I wasn't that familiar with.
We don't like comic book stolen valor.
Exactly.
Yeah,
the only thing really I knew about this was quarter box, 50-cent box fare when I was in college. I mean, this stuff was easily found in any back issue bin where they were just dumping stuff that nobody wanted to read at that point because there wasn't a TV show based on it. So, and what struck me, I was always sort of curious about it. But, at college age, I thought the concept seemed a little goofy. But
sure,
there are 2 covers that I love. And one is this cover you're showing right now. And this Joe Kubert, I love Joe Kubert. This cover alone, if I had found it, in more recent years, I would have picked this up just for the cover, knowing that he didn't draw the interiors.
Yeah, and we're showing Weird Tales 93, which is the first appearance.
Right. So this is Weird Ward Tales. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's, DC at this time period. I think this book may have started in the
1980 is the
1980
publication date. It's a publication date of this issue. November 1980 is the cover.
Right. That's when this feature started appearing. So it's DC did this they did Weird Western Tales, and this was just a trend at the time period. If you can imagine when Marvel was doing Werewolf by Night,
sure,
Man Thing. So horror sort of influenced, Swamp Thing was coming out at this time from DC. So horror stuff was sort of in vogue. So DC was taking their war titles or their Western titles that were on the wane and sort of injecting this weird concept, into it. So most of the features before this, it's, soldiers fighting dinosaurs, soldiers fighting robots, that kind of stuff.
And we're going to get both of those as
exactly.
Yeah.
Almost always, but not exclusively in the World War II setting until this feature. So there's this cover. There's also another great cover by Jim Aparo a couple issues later on that I would see, and it would almost make me want to pick up the book, but not quite enough. With the lucky here. The Frankenstein's monster character holding a giant swastika over his head. He's
Oh,
about to
sure.
throw it down. It's a great cover. So, so that's about all the background knowledge I had on this going into it.
Right. Yeah. And, honestly, that seems like certainly enough to know about, as it were. And I think that this is designed, this is very clearly the era where what you're
There it is,
getting is you see something on the spinner rack, like the pretend one behind me, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this looks cool. I want to buy it. I grabbed many books that way. I was just like, oh, this is really interesting,
And look, in 1980, if I were reading comics as a 7-year-old kid and had seen this or the previous cover, totally would have gravitated to it because it's, the universal monsters, you think, and then when you actually read it, it's very disturbing, at least the first few stories. So it's not at all, not ultra kid friendly. I mean, it's sanitized, but the concepts are very disturbing for short form.
Sure. And we are going to talk about how surprised I am on some of the storytelling of, there's language that I think they felt was appropriate for World War II. And in 1980, you could be like, it's only a little while ago. It hasn't aged that well, but there's actual storylines that I'm like, oh, wow, this is really a lot further than I thought. So I had never heard of these characters until, James Gunn heads over to DC, and then they start listing all these projects he's going to do, and I'm like, okay, this sounds interesting. And as soon as you Google it, you're like, okay, I can see how they want to do a series on this. And I've seen much of the first season of that show, and I have enjoyed it. Mr. Brody, were you familiar with these characters before they popped up on Max?
No, I watched it simply because it was James Gunn, and I'm a fan of his, and I trust in his process, and so I watched it. The reviews were good. I really enjoyed the show and the humor. Thought the animation was great.
Yeah.
And I thought the comic would be similar to the show. It was not.
But it's not. Really. No, and the characters are, there's a couple of similar characters, but it is very different. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Eric, your familiarity with the Commandos, and not Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. These are the Creature Commandos.
Or Schwarzenegger's Commandos, still one of the great films of the 80s, just for its Radon Chong-ness.
By the way, don't trivialize it by saying of the 80s. One of the one of the great films. Period.
And let's be honest, probably the best villain death scene in any movie.
Right, with the best line.
Let
off some steam. I knew nothing of this, and it's funny, I remember when Guardians was kicking around initially in the Marvel universe. I wasn't sure I had heard of Guardians either. I'd heard of some of those characters, and I realized I actually had a copy of a couple of Guardian issues from my back catalog of mid 1980s.
There was like an 80s, 90s Guardians that has Yondu and some of the other characters.
Yes, those are the ones I knew.
Who we see.
Starhawk.
Yeah, we see them in, I think, Guardians 2. We see that group of Guardians at one point.
Right.
And the character that I knew from the Guardians that we were getting on screen was Rocket Raccoon, because he'd had his own standalone series. I hadn't read it, but I'd seen it on the spinner rack. And you see the raccoon with the jetpack, and you're like, nah, oh, look, Frankenstein's holding a swastika. So,
Right, which would have checked off a fair amount of boxes for me as a young person.
Fair.
And I did watch the show as well, similar to Brody. I trust in the creator of this, and really now that I've watched even more episodes of Creature Commandos in prep for this, it's a perfect marriage of storyteller and story, and even though this story is pretty markedly different in sort of scope and tone from the show, but it's still you could see why he would have been attracted to telling this story. I mean, it's almost like a Tarantino enters the DC universe at times, which feels like a space he could inhabit as well, James Gunn.
Right. No, I think that you can see, and that's kind of the interesting thing is that, James Gunn, you realize pretty quickly, he goes really deep in the characters that he likes and appreciates. And that's, across both of the major publishers. And, if he ever didn't have this DC job and he was able to, pick some independent publishers, if anybody could make the Cerebrus movie, I feel like it's him. And I don't know that most people cannot make that movie. But you know, look, the fighting aardvark, I'm ready for it, but I think that the world might not be. And as I'm saying it out loud, it's like somebody has to have the option on that. Somebody's got to be trying.
What about Captain Carrot?
Please, yeah, Captain Carrot. I think you know, I think that would absolutely work. You know what? And I'm surprised it's not streaming on Max. Maybe in 2026. We don't know. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about. So we have this this collection that has a similar cover to what we have, but so there's these stories in here, and they're all fairly short. Well, not all, but for the most part, these are not full-length feature stories, Jeff, as you mentioned. It's mostly like an anthology collection of stories. So in 1980, James DeMatteis and the artists responsible for it, it lists Pat Broderick and John Solardo. I don't know their names, but as you referenced, I do know Joe Kubert. Boy, it's not a good day for me in names. So. And you know, it's an interesting idea, and it definitely grabs you when you see it. So had you, before I said, hey Jeff, do you want to be on this panel, had you read any of these stories, Jeff?
No, I hadn't read any of them. You know, I had some passing interest, but based on the cover, I just assumed they were sort of a goofy kid friendly ish concept of, here's Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and a werewolf in World War II, which is very exciting and fun sounding. As far as the creative team goes, now Pat Broderick, so they would often use these backup stories in these features to break in new talent. So I think this is both very early in J.M. DeMatteis' world and in Pat Broderick's. Pat Broderick goes on for Marvel. You would know him. I think he did a Micronauts run.
Okay,
and
sure.
He also did Doom 2099. From DC as far as it goes. After this, he took over Firestorm from Al Milgrom, and later goes on to do Captain Atom. So he's an artist I'm very familiar with. This is obviously early work of his, and he only actually does the first short story.
Yeah,
that's one of the interesting things about this is in the first 4 issues, I think we get 3 different artists, and maybe even 2 writers. So I think Mike Barr comes in and does maybe the 3rd or 4th story.
Well, yeah, and you know, Mike Barr, I think, ends up doing more of them. And do you know the writer that we have for the later ones, Robert Kanigher, I guess is how you say his name?
Yeah, Bob Kanigher or Robert Kanigher, something like that. Yeah,
Okay.
Bob Kanigher actually is not to get too far ahead of myself, but this is basically you have a bunch of boomers doing the first few issues, and then. Sure. Greatest Generation guys doing the second half, and it totally changes the tone. You get about a third into this, and the tone completely changes. It goes from a horror series that happens to be set during World War II to a World War II series with monsters in it, essentially. And that's because when it switches over, and so Lynn Wein is the original editor on the first few stories I noticed. Then Julie Swartz takes over, who's a much older gentleman at this point. And brings in more of his contemporaries to finish out the series, essentially. And Bob Kanigher, I stumbled upon. I got much more interested in what was happening behind the scenes when this happened than I was in the story itself. So I did a little bit of digging. And Bob Kanigher,
please tell us about it. Yeah, that's I love that stuff.
We're here for that.
Yeah.
So Bob
Look,
Kanigher,
there's a reason that I subscribe to Rob Liefeld's podcast. Okay?
Oh yeah.
And
this is
it's not
totally
because it's not because I want to hear about the Youngblood reboot. It's because he knows all the fights. Yeah.
Right. So Kanigher is a veteran of DC war stories, and if you're familiar with Sergeant Rock, sure. I think he co-created Sergeant Rock with Joe Kubert. Enemy Ace, a great war. I mean, I love reading his war stuff, and he's also a master of this short form. So like a 8-page story or whatever. He's just a really good writer, and he also wrote he's sort of the father of the Silver Age. He wrote the first appearance of Barry Allen, which is that showcase number 4, which is largely considered the beginning of the Silver Age of comics. And he did something like a 22-year run on Wonder Woman.
Whoa.
So a big name in DC in this time, 60s, 70s, 80s.
So he's trying to show up Chris Claremont's 17-year run on X-Men. He's like, 17, please. I got plenty more stories.
Yeah, he and Ross Andrew, who from like Spider-Man.
I know him from 70s Spider-Man.
Yeah, they did that run together. But apparently on this feature, when Julie Swartz and Nelson Bridwell take over as editors, they bring in Kanigher to write this series, and he doesn't get it at all. Like he just says, well, I didn't quite get it. I didn't really like the characters that much. They weren't, I think, how did he put it? There wasn't anything beautiful in the series or something. I forget exactly how he said it. And so that's why he introduces the Medusa character that you get later on.
Which, by the way, that is one of the things I like about the stories is adding that character. I think that actually is like you've added a new dynamic because we kind of feel like they do the same things in battle. And then you bring her, and I until I was reading it earlier this week for this, I didn't even know that character. I'd never seen her. She's not on the cover, so I really didn't even know we were going to get Medusa, which I thought
she's also very pretty. But let's be honest, as Medusas go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Really?
I mean,
would you kick her out of bed? No.
No. I mean, if she leaves the do-rag on, like, what are you going to complain about?
Yeah. Exactly.
And she doesn't turn you to stone. You might get bitten a lot, but that might be
like that.
I don't know. I take one look at her and I'm going to turn to stone, if you know what I mean. Sorry, I can't help myself. Anyway.
What if the snakes are all very creative with their tongues? I mean, that could be.
All right, so you're opening it up, Jeff. I want to let you finish the thought, though. So he brings Medusa into the mix.
Yeah, and my perspective on that is some of the stories work really well with her, and some of it feels like trying to add a female member to the A team. Like it just gets kind of awkward. I think there's more. There might be an issue.
I think her name was Amy.
They did it with a couple actors. Apparently, they did it with Tia Carrera, but she got a different job. She had to anyway.
She had to save Wayne stock. Obviously, she was really good.
Exactly right.
So she was always shimmying off to a ballroom blitz. I'm sorry.
She had bigger fish to fry.
That was the TNA team you're thinking of.
Yeah, totally different thing. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, there's like a few episodes where they're like having to camp outside of a mission. It's like, does she have her own tent? It's just really strange. But anyway.
No, that is good. But anyway, back to this. So no, I can agree that sometimes it does feel a little forced. Conceptually, the character is great to kind of supplement this, and I do think it works in some of the stories. But you're right, it's not the perfect fit in all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
let's be honest.
Go ahead. Brody.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Please. I'm sorry, Brody. Go.
I was just going to say, in terms of Medusa, and we'll get more into this. Her snakes are like 8 inches long. She practically has to kiss people to attack them. Like it's ridiculous. She's like, and every German wants to see Fräulein's hair. Oh, let me see Fräulein's hair. Yeah. And there's the snakes. Another one. Hey, let me see Fräulein's hair. And how dangerous can a woman be if she's got to run up to you within 3 inches of you so that the snakes can come out and maybe bite you?
Well, I'll tell you that my wife would be dangerous if she gets close enough to take my credit card. We'll be right back.
Oh my.
I mean, Medusa in Marvel Comics, at least her hair goes out really long and she can attack people at a distance.
I also had the question, she's getting shot at quite a bit. Yeah. And are the snakes taking the bullets for her? Like, I'm not sure
that's in my notes.
She survives.
None of them are bulletproof, but as soon as they come out with their guns, Medusa.
Lucky's strong. Right.
Yeah, Lucky. Your bomb goes off. He's not dead. He's just body parts.
Yeah. But Jeff, finish your sort of assessment on the run of all these stories.
Well, yeah. So that's essentially it. There is a lot of uneven. I feel like it had a lot of potential, but didn't quite know what it wanted to be. And I think it was mostly an editorial. You basically there's a moment where DeMatteis and Fred Carrillo, who ends up drawing the latter 2/3 of the book. He's a Filipino artist. He did a lot of horror stuff at DC, Phantom Stranger. They do a couple stories together at the end of DeMatteis's run. And that feels like if it had gone more in that direction with that creative team, I felt like there would have been something they were really building on there. But with the shift from Julia Schwartz and Bob Kanigher, the tone just changed and the stories got much less interesting, a little less psychologically, a little less depth there. The DeMatteis stories are mostly about we don't want to become the thing that we're fighting against, essentially. They're monsters, but they don't really be monsters in the same way the Nazis are. So they're always fighting against that. And then by the time we get to the later stories, it's like, death to the Ratsies, and then we're just off to the races. So it's a little more straightforward.
By the way, does Julie Schwartz go on to become the publisher or editor-in-chief or something at DC? I feel like I know that name more from sort of a little bit later than this time period.
Yeah, I don't think so. He's almost like their Stan Lee, though. He's sort of has a honorary sort of leadership role, but he's the editor of the Superman books. He's just a huge name, and you kind of get the impression maybe they had to push him out a little bit after Crisis, because a lot of his stuff sort of felt, and to take nothing from him, by the way, because obviously in the Silver Age, he was a very influential and important editor of DC. But after Crisis, and they were trying to bring in, like, for instance, on his Superman run, you can read a Superman story from 1954 or 1984, and it's the same story.
Right.
So they just needed to shake that up. So I think he leaves regular work at DC shortly after, maybe about 84 or 5.
Sure. So he has... So basically, the publishing side of DC had Crisis on Infinite Schwartz. That was really the problem, and that's what they wanted to rectify.
Yeah.
Well,
he got Jim New Universe. Jim Computer. So.
When you think of the books that Marvel canceled so that they could add the New Universe, I'm talking Power Man and Iron Fist, Shang-Chi. Anyway, at some point, I feel like this would be there needs to be a special on New Universe. How it's like one pretty good title, 2 that are okay, and then like 3 of the worst ideas in comic book history. I'm looking at you, Kickers Inc. But anyway, that's definitely not this show. I want to talk to you guys sort of generally about the stories that worked for you first. We're not going to go through all of them that are in this collection, but I don't believe it's free anymore on Amazon, but I do think it's worth a read. I need to talk about the Children's Crusade story, which I think is the 4th one. And I did talk a little bit to James DeMatteis about that. And I'll ask you first, Eric. And there's a lot of stuff in here. It's like, well, you couldn't make this today. You 1000% would not have violence by and against children like you have in this one story that, let me just double check the page count on that. It's like 8 pages. And they cram a lot of violence into that, Eric.
Yeah, and it gave me vibes of Children of the Corn and Village of the Damned, which are 2 of the movies that, even though I don't even think they're necessarily good movies, they still scare the crap out of me. Malachi and He Who Hides Behind the Rose. That was such a creepy story. Yeah. And you're right, it was so quick. Yeah. To the point, and that's one of the things in the storytelling, because I enjoyed this quite a bit, actually. It's a very fun read, and I can't recommend it enough. In terms of its escapism, it doesn't go deep. It kind of goes wide instead of deep. But this one story here would be a fantastic, like, one-off, like a Twilight Zone Black Mirror if they were a little more R-rated. But the creepy kids, and then even at the end, what happens to the kids, and I found a visual similar to it of the Garbage Pail Kids.
The Garbage Pail Kids movie?
Yes. Yeah. I sent that to you. Yeah. It's basically when they get all fat. So it's like, oh, I guess our kid murderers aren't going to work. Let's get rid of them painfully, mind you. So they get blown up from the inside.
And I
think a payoff.
I think it's the only story that I actually referenced when I talked to James DeMatteis about it, because it was so jarring. Well, Eric, you sent me 3 emails, so now I'm looking for what you sent me, and then herein lies the problem.
Probably in the first.
Okay, well, that's
first or second. Yeah, I also could bring it up just on my phone.
No. That the last thing I want you doing is holding up pictures on your phone. It's there's nothing
more than once.
There's nothing more boomer than that. So here is the image from the story. What comes next is more terrible as the hyper-strength chemicals in their young bodies run amok, convulsing distorting. And then, yes, Eric does give us the reminder of the Garbage Pail Kid movie. And
which I would like to think that one panel is what gave us all the Garbage Pail Kids. In my heart of hearts, I want to believe that was the genesis.
Adam Bomb, ADAM Bomb. Yeah, look, you might be onto something. And Brody, sorry, finish your thought.
No, I was just saying there's a couple of images I think I grabbed from that storyline before this.
Okay.
Too.
Yeah. Well,
including that kid getting shot.
Yeah, that's one. That you made me kill my mama. It said repeatedly. So of course he's like, well, I'm gonna be like Brad Pitt, killing Nazis.
And then Hitler shows up, and they're all like, "Yeah, Uncle Hitler, Uncle Adolf."
Well,
fake Hitler,
Hitler. Right.
Yeah.
Hatler, his non-union equivalent.
Yeah. No, it's like it's like when your kid buys a ticket to go see Blippi. They don't get the real Blippi.
It was Timu Hitler.
Yeah, DC's famous for that out of the way. Like 90% of the stories that Hitler shows up in DC war comics ends up being an imposter. So,
they shot FDR, and that wasn't real either. And I was like, dude, they're killing FDR. That's a bold move.
Yeah,
early too.
Yeah, so the gang of children. So we're seeing it here. You've betrayed our Führer. You've betrayed all of Germany. So they just descend upon these people. And you're talking about Garbage Pail Kids looks. And again, I'm specifically speaking to our visual audience. There's this kid on the bottom right with the teeth that are way too big for his mouth. That's to me like a ventriloquist doll. There's like that evil face. This is one of the creepiest.
Cornholio.
Right. That's true. He does have a real Beavis vibe. So this one, more than anything, I think it's probably the best written out of all the stories that I read in this collection, but it's also the most jarring, upsetting, and each page you're like, oh no, it's not going to get worse. It gets worse. It really does get worse. I want to know your thoughts on this story, Brody.
Well, it's certainly slightly different than the other stories, and it's horrible that they would brainwash kids to kill their parents and all.
Sure.
For me, it was another example of a story that looks like it's missing pages, like they got edited. Like every story we read, there's a brief setup. This is the mission. We're going to go on the mission. There's a little bit of mayhem. Lucky throws a car, and then it wraps up conveniently. It's like in the Medusa episode where they were poisoned with the sarcophagus wine they decided to drink. Who would drink that?
Right.
Like, and then all of a sudden they're fine. Good thing the venom from the snake bites was the cure. I mean, how could that even be a thing?
That was the worst. That was the worst story in the book, I think.
Yeah,
that was terrible.
Well, just to interject, there's some real contenders for worst story. But
yeah, I'll get to that.
That's right up there. Anyway, finish your thought.
And it was not my favorite of the worst. It was not my pick for the worst. Okay. And then because they don't want to kill the kids, they suddenly just garbage kid them and fatten them up and explode them. Like conveniently, here's a way we don't have to kill them.
By the way, when a child explodes, it is dead.
Yeah. Yes. But
except for Honey, I Blew Up the Baby. All right, so I guess that's
right. So
that's the exception, not the rule.
Listen, anytime Nazis die, I'm all about it. But you don't want to see the kids die.
No,
and it just showed the horror of exaggerated horror of Nazis. To me, it was just it was a story that I might have enjoyed more had it been a little bit longer. It just ended abruptly, like all of them did.
Yeah.
Where they just seemed like we need to end this. They explode. Okay, great. Yeah, go with that. So for me, it was just too short.
Yeah.
But I like to Eric's point. I like the concept. I thought the horror of it, of the kids killing his own mother. But I look at it in 1980. This was when the Dark Phoenix saga was being put forth with John Byrne artwork. Right. And the artwork in this thing is juvenile 1960s artwork that my buddy Steve Ditko would have drawn. So,
all right. Well, you got to be careful with that now. You can't be throwing around Steve Ditko unless you're talking about Speedball. I'm sorry. I got very distracted by a comment in the chat. Our friend Husey is here. And he said, weird to not hear Eric defending the Nazis. Obviously, that's a joke. But I was about to bring up this comment. There's only one Superman, And his name isn't Clark Kent or Kal-El. His name is David Brody. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Husey.
And
Yeah.
but also our fearless leader, the great Jonathan London, says, "I love Jeff. Miss you, dude." We may see Jonathan at Comic-Con Revolution in Ontario in just a few weeks. And I'll go over with Jeff my very tight schedule, how I may or may not bring my son with me. But you were talking about how much you love 50-cent boxes, and there's nothing that Jeff Winstead likes more than the dollar comic boxes at Comic-Con Revolution in Ontario. Buy your tickets now, because you're just like, oh no, I'm good. You'll spend like the whole con going through those dollar.
Oh
boxes.
yeah. I think I walked out having spent a grand total of $15.
And you got 15 books.
Exactly. Very happy.
It's Jeff's hometown buffet, basically, is the comic bin.
Yeah. Well, Brody, I definitely want to, and I probably will echo your thoughts on some of the other stories. I just kind of wanted to talk about the one that jumps out at me. Jeff, I want to get your thoughts on this before I ask each of you to isolate a different story that you feel worked for the most part, if there is one. But Jeff, reading this for the first time, these murderous children who love the Fuhrer. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, I agree with Eric. This was, if not the most disturbing, at least one of the two most disturbing stories in the book, from a conceptual standpoint.
Sure.
Not to jump train, but to kind of go back to the beginning, like when we get the origin of the creature commandos on like page 2, where they're not sort of, we just found Dracula in a tomb. We made him a creature commando. We engineered this guy to be, our government engineers this guy to be a real vampire. Our government turns Lucky into this monster for the purpose of scaring the Nazis and the Japanese. Our government, made this guy who had a psychological problem where he thought he was a werewolf, a real werewolf.
Yeah.
So that alone was like, oh, this is not at all what I expected this series to be about. It's not fun, universal monsters. It's actually pretty perverse, the setup. And that sort of set the tone, at least as we've discussed, for the first third of the book when DeMatteis was writing. And I thought that was a more interesting tone if they had continued with that than what we got in the later stories.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that I prefer that tone. The DeMatteis stories stand out as just being, several cuts above the rest. Brody, I am very interested in what you don't like, but what if you had to isolate one or two stories? You're like, okay, we're the one we're talking about, the children. Like, I probably would like it if it was longer. Was there another one you're like, okay, this one's pretty good?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
In fact,
by the way, I kind of knew that was the answer, but
even at free, I felt like I lost money. I felt like I got ripped off. The only thing I got, to be honest with you, the fact that I learned what the word Brobdingnagian, there was one part where they said there was a Brobdingnagian conflict, which I learned meant gigantic, and the use of cocksure in a comic book.
Now you used to be able to be cocksure in comic books, not anymore.
Yeah. But to your point, you brought up language. Obama. The fact that they're constantly using Japs and Nips. I understand you're telling a story about.
I wasn't going to say either of those words, but yes, there are.
Well, I mean, they are Japs is short for Japanese, and Nips is short for Nippon. It is what it is.
All right,
it's wartime terminology, so they put it in the comic. They wouldn't use it now.
I'm not going to use.
I won't say them again.
I'm not going to use something that sounds very similar to Kike Hernandez's name either. So keep in mind that.
Wait, is that a threat, Christian?
No, I'm just saying. Like, I wouldn't throw these words around.
All right. Well, I'm quoting the comic book.
To your point, Brody. To your point, it's just like, oh yeah, 1980, 1981. No problem. Let's throw those in there because look. Of course they would have talked that way. We've seen movies from that era. We've seen movies set in that era. It's just very jarring today to see.
My bigger problem with language, imagine in the X-Men when Hank McCoy converted to the blue furry beast as opposed to the regular beast he was. If every time they wanted him, Professor X was like, hey, you ugly freak, get over here.
Yeah.
Or Nightcrawler. Hey, you ugly blue demonic piece of crap. Shreve in this thing is offensive for no point. He even refers to Medusa, who's a beautiful woman, as an ugly freak. You ugly freaks, look in the mirror. You ugly freaks. Even when he realizes he likes them and he needs them, he still treats them like dirt. To me, like comic books used to be about acceptance and people are different and and then the one thing that got me was the blind woman. First of all, why is there a blind princess just in the middle of the road? Like, well, we need a blind princess. We'll just put her in the middle of the road. She's all by herself. She's a princess.
Well, they told her it was a penthouse apartment, and she was none the wiser.
Right. Now, I made a comment in my notes, and then later I was proven right. Remember when the kids were blind? What did one of the panels show? All the kids are touching the faces of the creature commandos because that's what blind people do. They feel your face.
Yeah.
Yet the blind princess.
We all talked about Daredevil. Yeah. We saw it.
But the blind princess had no clue she's talking to a robot. Not once did she touch the robot's face. Oh, you're so quiet. I'm with the quiet American. She's blind. Not once does she hold his hand. He has a metallic hand. Never realizes. Nobody says to her, "You're talking to a robot."
No,
you stupid
that's
idiot.
the worst thing about it. None of her friends tell her. None of her
they're having a
hirelings.
laugh right off panel.
I mean,
Right.
yeah,
It
that
reminded
was
me of
almost the
Young
most sadistic thing in the
Frankenstein.
book. Yeah.
It reminded me of Young Frankenstein when the monster goes to the house and the old man is talking to the monster and he has no clue he's talking to a monster because he's blind. I mean, listen, if you're not going to show blind people touching a face, fine. But then 2 issues later, the kids are like feeling the faces. There was no continuity in like, for instance, do you remember this earlier on where the werewolf says, they gave me a serum. I can now fully control my powers. And then for the rest of the story, he could no longer control his powers.
Yeah, it lasted a minute.
And how many
But
times?
what a minute that was, by the way.
And how many
And that
times
did
is
happen
the
right
bat-
at the editorial shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And how many
okay,
times
okay.
it was like nobody read the previous issues? How many
No.
times is the bat
connection.
is the bat gonna screw with the plane? He's gonna scare the pilot, and then he's gonna fly to the back of the plane and control the rudders so the plane crashes. You can't keep doing the same trick over and over again. It was like, and then how many times is Lucky gonna die? And they go, well, you know what? He was a hero. I guess I should have been nicer to him. And then he's alive. And then he dies, and they go, wow, he's dead. I guess I should have been nicer to him. And then he's alive. And then he's in the underwater and he dies. I guess we should have been nicer to him. And then he's alive again. Do you think maybe they would have realized, number one, he's not going to die. And number two, you should have been nicer to him.
I would say that was a joke. I think that was one they were in on. It's like, oh,
They were trying to crack each other up. Like,
yeah,
hey,
no,
look at
it's
this.
the you killed Kenny. I mean, it's basically you killed Lucky. It's like,
They
oh,
weren't
Lucky's
like
all right.
tongue in cheek. They weren't like, oh, look, he's dead. Ha! They were like, oh, he
poker
gave his
face.
life. Okay.
So in the comments, we have Commander comic. I know they lost their touch. And by the way, Husey a little while ago, when Brody was talking, Husey noted that he's reported us, but he also said, I thought I was on the show for a second. Yeah. But no. We weren't characterizing the queen. But then that might have sounded like you. No, Brody, I think that every point there is valid, and it's not even look. There's aspects to the stories that I think work better than others. That I'm like, okay, this is a lot dated. Some of the language, some of the ideas, the way these characters treat each other. Brody, you view comic books the same way I do, with kind of acceptance and like, yeah, let's have a little bit of everybody. This is a little bit more of a Marvel school of thought than some of the casual DC characters. But honestly, I think that if we were comparing, like Jeff mentioned, Werewolf by Night, Tomb of Dracula, and Swamp Thing versus Man Thing, all that kind of stuff, I think that there would be something to be said for that. Eric, what were some stories that stand out for you from this as good, or at least almost good, or possibly just the least bad?
Well, apparently I enjoyed this more than my Brooklyn compatriot to my right or left. I don't know directions. Where the next over there?
Yeah, he's over there.
It's changing all the time.
Yeah, I know, man. I can't keep up. I think for me, I like this as the parts were greater than the whole. Right. There's so many great moments along the way. G.I. Robot, fantastic character. One that they've really, if you watch the show, they got some great mileage out of that character. In fact, I was watching that the Here's to the Tin Man episode. I think it's like episode 3 or 4, which is his whole backstory. and it's sort of his lifespan, him being in prison for decades. I mean, it was really like when it focuses on a character, it actually is pretty good storytelling. There is no connective tissue here. No. This is as a compendium, I think also too, we're reading this in one, felt swoop. So we're thinking, oh, okay, this stuff might bleed into each other the way that a lot of these books in the Marvel Book Club do, the Geekscape Book Club, sorry.
Thank you.
Do. I corrected myself. But there's not much connective tissue here, if any. In fact, I'd say maybe there's none. But
yeah, and for our visual audience, this is what we were talking about earlier.
Oh, him shooting FDR.
Yeah. Mistake my foot, you tin-plated phony, because they have to make sure we understand that he's not actually murdering FDR. By the way,
Husey has that on a T-shirt already.
Due to some weird loophole, Robot FDR would also be able to be president 4 times. So we'll see if we can get him on the ballot. But
he has hats made up.
Right. Robot FDR, by the way, still in a wheelchair, though. They couldn't figure out how to fix that piece of it,
Well, if he stands up, it's obvious he's not the robot. They got to put him in a wheelchair.
That's true. Hold on. John Voight stood up as him in Pearl Harbor. You telling me that movie was inaccurate?
No. John Voight didn't realize that.
Hey, listen.
I'm sorry. I'm okay, Husey. I'm okay with Brody's racism, but feet jokes are too much. Thank you, Husey.
Not so much feet; it was lower extremities, not just feet.
We should have asked Husey to read this. But anyway, Eric, before I ask Jeff to isolate a story, finish your thought, please, sir.
Yeah, well, we talked about the kids' story. I all the GI robot stuff. I mean, the blind thing was a little bit like Eric Stoltz in Mask was able to get Laura Dern, which was as a kid watching that movie, I'm like, dude. So wait, if I have a hideous face, I just got to go find blind women. Like it gave me the wrong message as a young person.
By the way, I don't even believe Eric Stoltz getting Laura Dern now. Like I feel like that's even a bit of a stretch,
Complete. So the stories were not as much. They're not stories per se, right? They're sort of like greatest hits. This kind of feels like a playlist more than a compendium.
Well, to that point, the image we're showing right now is like we're really seeing the werewolf really just devour a whole team of wolves here.
Yeah,
and I love his what? No more. I wanted to eat more wolves.
Well, as I could show you what I was wrestling away from my dog before, this image definitely spoke to me as well as a owner of not one but 2 Meshuggah pups. I very much saw that. I'm like, oh, I feel seen. But I kind of wish, and this, by the way, is where the show improves. The show actually has real stories. I mean, that's the thing about James Gunn. He appreciates what connects us to characters. He appreciates, the hero's journey. Sid Field's sort of models, the circle model, whatever you so choose. But he gets that we care about these characters deeply in comics. And then, of course, in movies, even big franchises. So here it's the moments that play best is Lucky, the one who's silent, who feels the most. Fascinating character. And really kind of got to me what makes Mary Shelley's book interesting. So I think I wish it had the courage, or at least the focus, to kind of allow those moments to arc a bit more instead of being great scenes. It's got plenty of great scenes, great stories. Unfortunately, not so much. But I did like how they did bounce around all over World War II. They're fighting Germans in one, they're fighting Japanese in another. Or Brody has other names for both those groups, but I'm not going to
have any names.
We could call the Germans Krauts. That's fine. I think that's still okay.
Are you sure about that? I'm not sure.
I think that's fine because it's short for
sauerkraut.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Don't be a sour.
To your point, Eric, by the way, some people might not know, but Mary Shelley wrote the book that Kenneth Branagh's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is based on. So I think that people need to know that that's where that came from.
And I'm glad Mary Shelley didn't live to see that movie.
So
can we discuss Ruth's Chris Steakhouse?
No, let's do a whole show on Ruth Chris Steakhouse. It should be Ruth Chris's Steakhouse. I get it.
No, it was Chris's Steakhouse and Ruth bought it. That's the story.
Oh, is that really?
Oh, really?
That's
Yeah,
right.
Chris's
Brody's
restaurant
right.
was a famous restaurant in New Orleans, and then Ruth bought it and kept the name. So it was Ruth's Chris Steakhouse.
It should be double apostrophes.
Well,
no,
I'm
it
here
was
for
Chris
that.
Restaurant. It was Chris Restaurant, and Ruth bought it.
stay tuned
Chris
for the Patreon only show where we'll talk about how they took half the name out of Buffalo Wild Wings. But this isn't the time for that. We'll get to
P-dubs.
it. Sure, but there was another dub back in the day. So, Jeff, what story stood out for you out of these?
So the story, my favorite one was there's a mission that they go on where it's essentially a murder mission. We don't know that going into it, but into the story, Lucky has to kill a woman who's a Nazi. I think, is she a scientist or a doctor or something?
Yeah,
he has
she
to
was
kill
a
her.
French scientist or a Swiss
yes,
scientist.
Right. And he so distraught that he tries
captured her.
Yeah, they had captured her. That's correct. He's so distraught that he tries to commit suicide. And so you started to get the framing sequence of Lucky's tried to commit suicide, what happened, then you get the backstory, then you get the wrap up, where you do sort of begin to get what could have been an evolution to these stories where I think might be maybe the same story or right around there is where we're told that Griffith can control his changing. Shreve seems to have a little more sympathy at that point for Lucky. Lucky can grunt because of whatever procedure where he tried to kill himself that didn't work. The doctors came in, and so he might be able to speak, but they never really revisit that other than he grunts in later stories. And that story is also another short one. Had a lot of depth. There was really something there, and that's what made the transition. I think the very next issue is when Bob Kanigher takes over as writer, and that's when the transition just seemed so jarring. I'm like, what the heck happened here, And I think it was just an editorial switch that sort of killed the momentum. I think.
Right. Yeah, I think that you can see that there are times where somebody really gets what's interesting about these characters. And I mean, of course, one of them would want to, commit suicide. Husey, Kenneth Branagh wrote the book called No One Knows That I'm From Belfast. Also, I stink. So thank you for that. He did make the first Thor movie. Eric, we'll go through some of your images momentarily, but this one, I think, perfectly encapsulates what Brody is trying to say, is that you kind of look at it and you get to the first page and it says things like the creature Commandos in roses are red, but blood is redder. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's where even what year this is gets a little confusing, right? Because like sometimes, what else was getting made in 1980 is very different.
Galactica 1980. So all of a sudden, Galactica 1980 isn't the worst thing from 1980.
No, there's some writing here that does feel like a good 10, 15 years older. But, I did like the Dr. Strangelove moment of Lucky riding a bomb. And of course,
that might be my favorite page from this collection. I think that
Agreed.
I was just like, oh, someone's having fun with this, and that's kind of what you want to see. So we've kind of looked at the best. We've talked a little bit about what's in between, but Brody, what I'm most interested in, what are your contenders for worst? And Eric, chime in if you've sent images on what he considers to be the worst, and I'll try and share them.
I've got two that stuck out for me. One was when they go to the future. Okay. And they fight a lion who has a thing in his paw, and that's why he was upset. Mm-hmm. That is such a cliche. Has that been done 25 times in other stories? Lion just wanted
as we go through life, we're all lions with a thorn in our paw, and we all want someone to pull it out. Why won't you let me help you, Brody? Why won't you let me pull the thorn out of your paw?
Yeah. So that episode, that was the episode where they showed that the world was free of war and hate, because they only have white blonde people. I mean, it was a Nazi story, basically, without being Nazis. They made a master race, and if everybody's white and blonde and pretty, there's no problems. There's no anger, there's no hate, there's no jealousy, there's no war, because there's no other religions. There's one religion and one race. And to me, that was disturbing, because I don't think they realized what they were saying when they wrote it, or they did. I couldn't tell. And then they're like, we have to kill you because you're different. Okay, except the little people that showed up from the past, the freaks, aren't going to have sex with the giant white people or each other. So there's no danger of like more Frankensteins happening. Also, they're not there to stay. They're there to go back, what they wanted to cure and then go back in time. So why they need to kill him? That to me, that was just terrible. But the one that gets the worst story is when they had just done some mission maybe it was the one with the kids. They were in a field. I don't know. They defeated the Nazis in a field. And then the next panel, I wrote this down. I want to get this right, where they were. They're in the temple fighting a flame goddess with no explanation. They're just they show the woman's being kidnapped, the Roman woman, and then they have a child who has superpowers. Then they show them killing Nazis, and then they're walking on a hill. That mission complete. And the next panel, they're in the Temple of Fire. How'd they get to the Temple of Fire? And they're fighting, but they're not really fighting her. She wants a soulmate, but she's also living where all the Nazis hid the weapons. It was all over the place. I don't know what that issue was about. So that's my least favorite.
That seems like those are both contenders and both perfect examples of why I was like, I did love the free aspect of this. But like Eric's been saying, there are things that I like, even not every story, but there's at least panels. We just had Frankenstein on the bomb, like from Doctor Strangelove, and so there's little things like that. I'm like, okay, so sometimes you feel like people were having fun with it. The story you talked about first, Brody, I think somebody wasn't having fun with it. They were bet like, can you write a Creature Commando story that's actually pro-Nazi? Can I just watch? It's almost like it was a dare. And I was just thinking, I'm like, I mean, you could publish that in the early 80s. You don't necessarily have to reprint it, I mean, I guess it's fine. No, Husey, Brody is not talking about Dawson's Creek, but we appreciate that. What do you want to isolate, Eric? You sent so many images. One of these has to be from the thing that you thought was worst in this book.
I think they're the one, and you guys brought up before how the commander is such a one note, like foil for them. You creeps, you ugly, you remind me to murder you later. I mean, that dude was so broadly drawn. And then there's that one story where the kids are laughing at him.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, to them, you're the freak. And this is, I think, probably the third email. So right now, for our radio listeners, our wireless listeners,
Count Chocula.
Yeah, we've got basically the what was that superhero show from the 70s, maybe even 60s, that had Rope Man, Diaper Man, Cuckoo Man. Do you guys remember this show?
I don't remember.
No. I'll be sending y'all. I'll be sending y'all
like something that I would remember. Yeah, but I love this Sergio Aragones.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it was totally Mad Magazine right here, and so these little asides were kind of strange, but yeah, and I think what you're bringing up before, David, too. It's like there's very much like a sort of a kitchen sink approach to the storytelling, because they will just randomly throw in like Satan showed up at one point.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
which happens, by the way.
Yeah. Why is he hanging out with them? The use of Medusa was strange. There was a lot of repetition, but yeah, anytime I feel like they took subtext here, thank you so much. This is the frame. Why are they laughing at me? You were the freaks. No, Lieutenant Shreve. To the children, we are the creatures inhabiting fairy tales. But first of all, by the way, fairy tales are filled with freaks.
Yeah.
If I met fairy tale characters in real life at that age, even if I still had that gap in my teeth, like that one kid with the Mo Howard haircut.
Oh, I thought that was David Letterman. I didn't realize.
That was Mike Myers.
Fairy tales are
terrified of them.
Fairy tales are filled with trolls that live under bridges, witches who put children in the oven and eat them. No, I get it. Yeah, totally.
Well, and that's why it's smart when you look at the Creature Commando TV show, is that they brought what's his name, Flag, over
Rick Flag. From the Suicide Squad.
Yeah. So he's the guy working with them. And Rick Flag is a much more interesting character.
Because I mean, as proven, Rick Flag fucks. So obviously, I don't think Shreve fucks. That's what I'm getting at.
Not
Oh,
with
he
his
seems to have
attitude.
dates. No, but he seems to have a lot of dates. Like he seems to always go off
That's true.
with like another like lady. So apparently, ladies love I don't
Cool
know,
James.
white
They love
white
Cool
privilege.
That's a bell.
LLWP. I'm sorry. Yeah. LL Cool WP. Yeah. So, and to the extent, Brody, you were talking about how some of the art is a little erratic. A lot of times it looked like if you read comics from the 70s, there'll be one page Twinkie the Kid adventures, or Spider-Man is trying to rescue a truckload of Hostess fruit pies. I kind of looks like those. It definitely looks like those.
Yeah. And in this scene, he looks like he's from Archie Comics. Like it just.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
Stay out of Riverdale.
That's the ultimate comic insult. Is it like it looks like an Archie comic. I love this page where it has like multiple sort of
It's a history lesson.
Historical fact checks, like U.S. nicknames for the Mitsubishi CO1 fighter. And it's like, all right, you're just showing off that you read a book. Basically,
Right.
Which, unlike Husey, you're showing off that you read a book at some point.
Well, there's another one that I don't even bother looking for it, but it was basically when they allude, it's like a golem, the mythical creature that we studied in Hebrew school.
Yes.
It's like, okay,
Yes,
we get it.
Why would you see what Marvel used to do was put an asterisk,
Right.
and then in the box it would say a mythical. But this guy yelled it. He's like, yes, he's like the mythical character we believe in. Like it just made no. There was so many opportunities, and thank you for bringing that up. Where I thought an asterisk and an explanation box would have been like this happened previously, but they kept the exposition was ridiculous where they had to say everything. So yes, that stuck out in my mind that the guy would yell, "It's a mythical character we all believe in."
Right. Look, to that end, we have sort of the over explanation in this panel that Eric sent. Dr. Medusa, the venom from your snakes. That must have been the antidote to the wine, reversing the shrinking process. And look, this is coming from someone who last weekend with my son took in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones at home, so we could go see Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith on the big screen. And the amount of horrific dialogue that I've taken in the last week, this still outweighs I Hate Sand and so many other things, really.
Oh, well, and I did the whole marathon, so I watched all three of those. Yeah. With my and again, it was like the ultimate test of my love as a father was the fact that I didn't kill myself during that.
I told you that you should have showed up at hour 7 for
I tried
for A New Hope, and then and
God,
then left after the pod racing. Oh no, it doesn't. They don't show them in that order. But so and.
I'm not going to say that word, by the way.
I know there's a word that Brody wants to say.
I'm not going to say it because that word is actually offensive. I'm not going to say it.
But
the other two words
are not.
All right. And that's the last line of the issue.
Yeah,
I think that's end.
Well,
you look cuter as a blank. End.
That's like how cartoons from the 70s and 80s always ended on a joke that was never funny, but all the characters laughed. At a certain point, I was like, "Why is everyone laughing? Stop laughing. Like, this is not funny." And every show ended that way. I think even Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Yes, please, Mr.
Can I tell you an inside radio story without mentioning names? But there was a very prominent New York DJ.
Let's just call him Boward Byrne. Okay. Let's
no, not Boward Byrne. I don't consider him a New York DJ.
Ron Limas.
All right. That's enough. Stop guessing.
No, a New York DJ who used to be a co-host and then got his own show. But either way, what he would do is he would have to end the break, the talk period. For those who don't know what break means, the talk period before commercial would have to end on a joke by him.
Yeah.
And so even if it wasn't like ready to go to commercial, he would be like, "And that's why she crossed the road." And he would go like this. And that meant the guy running the board had to go to break. He had to end on a joke that he said. So that would be the last thing people heard. And so he would constantly like force things in, even if they're like 3 minutes into a conversation that could have gone 8 or 10. If he ended it big, he would go and it would go to commercial. So that's what it reminded me of. Like it just ended. So with that said, can anybody here explain to me how in the last issue that we read,
yes,
they just saved again, they saved the world again.
Yes.
They stopped the Nazis again. And then it cuts to them tied up in front of a firing squad and they're all being court-martialed. What did we miss
I can
something?
explain it. No,
Okay,
you didn't
great.
miss it. I
Let's
can
do.
explain it. So much in the way that I was saying that I became much more interested in whatever the backstory was, the main story on why the tone of the book shifted so much. The last page is essentially a meta explanation for why the Creature Commandos got canceled. So you just, there's a reference in there to Paul Levitz. Commander Paul Levitz says we need to. Well, Paul Levitz is a publisher of DC Comics. So basically, it's a meta story where they're about to be executed, i.e., the book is about to be canceled. It's a one-page story. I thought the same thing. I thought, was there like 7 other pages I just somehow lost? But they're basically about to be canceled. They thank the readers who wrote in to give them recommendations not to be canceled. And as a consolation prize, instead of killing them, Paul Levitz is going to shuttle them off into space. I mean, they're supposed to be on a suicide mission, but it gets derailed somehow. The thing flies off into space.
And they fly off into the future, right?
No, they just fly off into space. And that's, I think, as far as I know, literally the last time
was a different issue.
Okay. I'm so sorry.
Different issue, yeah. That was another issue where they got small. There's the weird fascination with Bob Kanigher making them tiny is very strange.
One of the possibly the greatest comedy album of all time is Steve Martin's "Let's Get Small." So yeah, that seems to be the time. So I love.
So
that.
Yes, and I think that's the last. This is the last time we see the characters. Yeah.
Sorry, that story that you just told.
Yeah, as far as I know,
more interesting than anything in the book. I love that. I love that they were like, we're going to cancel them. And they're like, all right, well, let's do this story where we say, thank you. And we call out the publisher.
Yeah. And it just goes to show that they clearly didn't know what they were doing with the characters, in the last sections of the book. And so that was a send off, and DC really didn't know what they were doing because the characters didn't reappear for like 30 years. I think they popped up in an issue of Superman. I didn't look at the date, but I'm guessing around 2010, 2012. And that was the first time since whatever that story, 1981 or 82, that they had been used. So.
Jeff, that backstory is fantastic, as the Christian mentioned, but as a reader, I never would have figured that out.
Oh yeah.
Right. And no. Why, if they had said, listen, we're sending you on a special mission into space, that would have made sense to me. But there still is no explanation in that comic book why they would put them on a court-martial situation and want to kill them. That part doesn't make sense. You want to cancel the book. You want to say, hey guys, we're retiring you. We don't need you to fight Nazis anymore. So it's fine. But it just was so out of nowhere. This one page, like, and thanks for saving the world again. We're going to tie you up and shoot you.
Well, I have two
what also
thoughts.
happens. Sure.
No, I was going to say, yeah. Well, no, actually, go ahead, Jeff, because you're answering his question.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think what also happens is Weird War Tales as a series ends 2 issues after this. So they're just trying to wrap things up as quickly as possible just to get the series out the door, essentially. So.
Yeah. And it's sort of a combination of 2 things. One of which I know Christian loves, which was on Saturday Night Live when they set fire to the set and Lorne Michaels only saved John Lovitz and Jan Hooks. Oh, no, Jan Hooks.
No, literally, no, only Lovitz.
Only
Lovitz. Yeah. Dennis Miller and Nora Dunn both came back the next season, but they did not get to go down to the limo. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, yeah. And then the other is, of course, the famous Poochie episode of The Simpsons when it's like, I now must return to my home planet. And then the sign goes up and you see the cell getting pulled out. And then Poochie died on his way back to the home planet. It's basically as random as that.
It is basically, yeah. Poochie died on his way to his home planet. Yeah. So, Brody, I think you probably wouldn't recommend that people read this, huh?
I would recommend people stop reading comic books forever.
Whoa!
If it meant reading this first.
Okay.
In fact, I texted Eric, who didn't text me back because he was probably so engulfed. But I said, I want to know what you think after a few issues, because I wanted someone else. I thought maybe it was me. I thought maybe I missed something, and I missed the beauty of it. Because listen, so far everything we've done in Geekscape Book Club that I haven't read before has been amazing. Like I've got, oh my God, thank you for bringing this up. This story I wouldn't have read normally, or I missed this classic, and I look forward to it. So when I started reading this, I'm like, this must be like a lost treasure. I cannot wait to read this compilation because I love the TV show. This must be like a diamond in the rough. And the artwork was horrific. The story, the whole thing was to me a train wreck with, like, as Eric said, an interesting thing. There was a good story. Like there was parts I really enjoyed, but overall it was just incongruous. I don't know why they made a paperback of it since it doesn't flow. Not for me. I'm out, dog.
Yeah, it was a little pitchy. I agree. That is a bit of a problem. I think that I would tell people to read the one with the children because I can't believe it. It's still like, read these 8 pages. Look at these great covers. Jeff, I think it's always good to read these things and realize, like, oh my God, this is all over the place. This works. This really doesn't. This is offensive, all that. How did you feel when you were done with this collection? Did you say to your wife, who doesn't really read comics, this is the one for you?
Yeah, no, I would not have recommended this one. Just as a fan of comics and a sort of a historian of DC stuff, I was glad to have read it, to just have it in my noggin. I would say if someone were to ask me, hey, do you recommend this? I say, yeah, read the first third. And then as soon as you see Julie Schwartz editor, just bail. Don't read past that.
That's fair.
To Eric's point earlier, and we've discussed a couple of times, that I think if you picked up a random issue, you just picked one up off the shelf and you read that story, you probably enjoy it. But this was written in a time before there were no trade paperbacks. They were never going to collect these things. They were always meant to be one-off stories. So the stories almost function like if you see the first few episodes of at least in the old days when the episodes were on network television, so like Smallville, you watch the first 8 episodes of Smallville, it's the same episode over and over and over. They just change the name of the villain. And the idea is they want to make sure somebody who just found the show is getting a standard episode of the show for those first few episodes. And that's kind of what happened here. That's why all the repetition, I think, where, hey, we have to show that Shreve is a jerk. Yeah, he's the real monster of the group, that kind of stuff. And we have to show that Lucky can survive a bombing, that sort of thing.
And that everyone should have been nicer to him.
Yes.
And he can throw a car.
Yeah. Another problem with the collections or reading this stuff digitally, this artwork on newsprint wouldn't be as gaudy because the coloring, when they put it on digital, they don't take the time to desaturate those bright colors, which, it's still the same green on the newsprint, but it's printed on yellow paper. And so it gets in it, the paper absorbs it. It really gets, I hate this about, modern collections of old stories. And so that's why if you're reading a new comic, like a new issue of the Avengers digitally, it's totally fine because the coloring is made for what they're printing today, which is really bright on bright paper, but it just doesn't work really well with old stuff. So to make, only because I know this, because Fred Carrillo, who was the artist in the latter half of the book, is a really good artist, because I've read a lot of his stuff on newsprint, Phantom Stranger stories and Swamp Thing stories. It just didn't translate here in that way.
Well, see, I liked his artwork. I thought the artwork in the second half was better. I thought the first half was all a lot of lines. Everything was lines. It just looked so ancient. And I thought when the artwork changed, although like you said, the colors are really crazy bright, I thought the artwork was they finally hired an artist. It actually got decent in the second half. So I went and looked. I was like, oh, this guy's much better than the people that were drawing the first bunch. So that was noticeable.
That love for muted colors printed on newsprint that has yellowed over the decades is exactly why you'll find my friend Jeff Winstead at Comic-Con Revolutionary at the Ontario Convention Center, May 17th and 18th. Get your tickets. You'll see us there. Not doing anything official, just wandering around and flipping through comics. You'll find us there. You'll see us there. Eric, I want to get some final thoughts, but you always put so much time into these emails. And again, sometimes they're largely visual. So why don't you explain for both our families gathered around the Victrola and also people who are seeing what you have there?
Well, I mean, as far as casting, whenever you're thinking about okay, I want to cast a real sort of badass commander who's kind of a jerk, maybe a little bit racist, I'm thinking Beastmaster. I'm thinking Mark Singer.
Great Mark Singer from the miniseries V. Yeah.
Played him in Arrow, I believe. That's where I think the character was. I don't think it was in Creature Commandos doesn't have it.
Doesn't have him, yeah.
I think I read that. I think Eric's right. I think that is what happened. I saw somebody make a note that he had one appearance in Arrow. So
Yeah. So Mark Singer, who still looked very good. You know,
Wow.
I don't know if he's
Wow.
got the Beastmaster body.
He's a good looking guy. You know, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Oh,
I loved him
see,
in V.
I was thinking Bill Burr for Shreve.
I could see that. Yeah.
Or Kanye West.
Yeah, and so this is the
No,
more
he-
recent. Here
as
he is
Hitler.
as Shreve, and
Yeah.
he's still a
Interesting.
good-looking guy. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm very pro Mark
That's
Singer.
perfect.
Yeah,
You know, this moment here, I believe, is what Jeff alluded to before.
That's right.
Was
Yeah.
when it was, and that was actually I very much second that story was really smart in its writing, because it held off on the reveal of what the mission was, what he was doing there, and then that, and of course, surprise, especially because she was so kind to him, that
Yeah.
you know, and she even justified why she was doing what she was doing. She got kidnapped to do it to save her family, and then of course Frankenstein realizing, or Lucky realizing, this was the mission. And I thought that was actually the effort that went into that plot. I wish you'd find more of this. I think if you picked up a comic of this on the spin rack, if you were hanging out in Ontario with Christian Bladt and you had $3 in your pocket, you could buy 3 issues of this and you'd be very happy. Reading all of it together, there's some work to it, but I found myself enjoying it far more than I didn't. I found the character moments that did sort of pop, and these like really fun panels. Like part of it too was like it had that Inglorious Bastard kind of energy.
killing Nazis,
killing Nazis, monsters killing Nazis. So even that stupid story with the dinosaurs, like all of a sudden, you have the Land of the Lost kind of dinosaur artwork, but the idea of, I don't know, a Frankenstein flying on a pterodactyl seems like something I would have drawn in Hebrew school, by the way. And he would have been attacking Hitler in my drawing potentially. So I feel like those moments were kind of fun, and there was enough of them to warrant things. I love the idea of a werewolf with a machine gun. So
who doesn't, by the way?
Right. So like the 8-year-old boy of us, but you realize too, again, what James Gunn brings is like giving us a character like Groot, and how his work on this title, and it is kind of strange because even the heart of Creature Commandos, the TV show, you don't really find much in these comics. But that's his specialty, really, is like he'll go weird and goofy, but he really does care about his characters and put some real thought and time into it. And that's the stuff that maybe we didn't have as much in these comics, but thank God we have James Gunn, hopefully steering DC into the right waters.
Yes.
Can I go ahead, Christian?
Well, I just wanted to point out before I change the image, this is what we were talking about earlier. He is like the Golem, that powerful creature fashioned by a rabbi centuries ago to aid oppressed Jews. Yes, that's the one.
Which Golem? Can you specify which Golem you're talking about?
Right.
What were you going to say, Brody?
To the point about the scientist being killed by Lucky. First of all, I understand they drew a straw and he lost or whatever. But I would think the vampire would have volunteered for that job since he likes killing people and drinking their blood. And he would have had no problem. Why pick the one guy who'd have a problem with it? Second of all, that scene of Frankenstein killing the woman who was nice to him, similar scene happened in Creature Commandos, the cartoon, where the Frankenstein's monster is living with the old lady, and she says, "Don't leave me. I don't want to be alone." So he kills her so she won't have to be alone.
Yeah, she's not alone anymore. Yeah.
Right. That's what it reminded. He killed her for her own good, kind of thing. I think maybe they adapted that scene for the TV show, sort of like as an inspiration, because that's what it reminded me of immediately. What I thought of was Frankenstein killing the woman who was nice to him because it had to be done. So
I think you can. I guess you can sometimes find moments or themes that stretch into the series. So this is the Creature Commandos Enter the War that Time Forgot. And then anytime that I get a JPEG of Land of the Lost, I will eventually share it on the show. So I appreciate that. I watch every episode of the show. That's not the father.
Wasn't the father. Yeah, that's the uncle, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
The father got written off after some point, and then the uncle came.
Contract.
The uncle, yeah.
Well, because all of a sudden you realize that Sid and Marty Krofft don't actually pay you in U.S. currency. You're like, oh, okay, so I signed a contract for $1 million Monopoly bucks. Thank you so much, Sid and Marty. Look, I think that look, there's definitely been books in this series, the Geekscape Book Club, that I've enjoyed more than others. And there's moments in this, I think even the ones that I don't like this one had some real issues. I still feel like there's some good takeaway from it. I always feel like it is possible. And I appreciate you, Brody, checking it out. And it'll be all right if you feel like, well, I don't trust you to recommend something anymore.
No,
but I hadn't read it before, so I did. Well, that's not true. I'd read 3 of these stories before, so I kind of knew.
Listen, again, anytime Nazis are being killed, I'm okay with it. But if you ask me my opinion, I would say read The Invaders, which is a much better collection of stories fighting Nazis. That was, to me, that was fantastic writing, good artwork.
That was a monthly series at one point.
That was a monthly series. One of the first comics I started collecting was Invaders, and tremendous, emotional, gut wrenching. Some of it, the artwork was much better. So if you like Nazi killing, if you want us to read the Invaders book at some point, I'm all in.
No, I will definitely do that. That's something that I've never actually read. I've seen it, and I've seen it in the dollar boxes with Jeff Winstead, actually.
And one of the best What If episodes is an episode about the people that replace Captain America after he dies. Fantastic follow up to the Invaders story. So make that part of it if you want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Before we let everybody go, and you can find out where to find them here on the Geekscape channel. Earlier this week, I did a special episode of Marvel Movie Talk where I talked to an author whose book is disappearing. His name is Jeffrey Brown, and he's a children's author and illustrator. And I have read many, and I do mean many of his books because my kids have Darth Vader and Son, Vader and Little Princess, which one of the things I talked to him about is like, these are kind of really big, like fundamental spoilers for the Star Wars universe that Darth Vader's are dead. And he's like, well, yeah, but for the most part, people just kind of get it. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. I got no problem with that. So you would be able to find that here on the Geekscape YouTube channel, but also in all the other places where you can find our shows. That is his book. Instead of holding it up to the camera, I should just show the clean JPEG I have. So Uncanny X-Men Days of Future Fun, and you'll see, Brody, you'll notice this is the sort of mid-'80s collection of X-Men.
With Lockheed and Kitty Pryde and Rogue, this is definitely like the 140s episodes issues. Yes.
Well, no. It's
130s.
It's Mohawk Storm, so it's like 170s. But the point is,
it's got Phoenix, so it's all.
Well, that's what I was going to say is that he just really wanted to have Phoenix in it, and he's like, I could have had Jean sort of like in the Jean costume from the '90s show. Anyway, so Jeffrey Brown has this book that's great for kids, The Uncanny X-Men Days of Future Fun. So you can check that out wherever books are found, which the old places, but also some new places. And we will be doing multiple episodes talking about Thunderbolts over the next couple weeks. So make sure you like, subscribe, and you will find those special episodes of Marvel Movie Talk. But on this show, we will keep in the theme, and we will be back in May, and I believe we agreed on the date of May 21st, which is a Wednesday, and we'll be reading Thunderbolts Red, which is a very different collection of Thunderbolts, but I kind of really wanted to read it. When I saw the cover, it was one of the ones that was recommended. It's got Red Hulk, it's got Deadpool, and it's got I like that Frank Castle's got a red skull because it's Thunderbolts Red. And I don't even know what iteration of Spider-Man that is. I'm not going to pretend. Where's Daniel Drew when I need him?
That's Venom. And, it's a Flash Thompson as Venom.
Oh, okay.
Agent Venom.
Agent Venom. All right. Yeah. Agent of Venom. Thank you, Jeff.
Exactly.
I thought maybe it was Tarantula, but very good.
And Elektra.
Yeah, I was going to say Elektra, who's alive, and at one point Elektra takes up the mantle as Daredevil in more recent years. So we'll be reading that Thunderbolts Red. And then, Jeff, I'll definitely want to have you back in June, not to let the dogs out, But a book that I've actually already read, we're going to be covering in June, and this is this collection, Superman for All Seasons. I don't know if you've read this, Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, but it's like a standalone story, and it's beautiful and it's great. It's sort of a very interesting telling of Superman to tie into the Superman movie, but that is not next month. That's a couple months away. Next month, we'll be talking about Thunderbolts Red. And you can find me on social media at Christian DMZ and my personal podcast, The Blackcast, BLADTCAST. Jeff Winstead, let's remind people the name of your book that is not Battle Hymn of the Republic.
No, it's the simple version. It's The Last Battle of the Revolution. Oh, thank you so much, Eric, which you can find on our friend Amazon, digitally and in print.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. And of course, your comic series, The Alternate.
Which you can also find on Amazon, only digitally, though.
Only digitally.
Thank you, Eric. See, Eric's so much better at bringing my props. I gotta do a better job ahead.
And then a picture of my dog on the computer too. So.
Oh well, that is also available on Amazon. You can get a print of that. Eric Connor, when and where can you be found?
I'm hanging out in various parts of the Geekscape universe, and pardon me, when this week. Although this week I'll be winning elsewhere, so I'm going to be in New Orleans on Friday. So if I do call in and want one this week, it might be a very different version of me, sort of the Red Hulk version of myself.
You'll have a po' boy in one hand and a platter of beignets in the other,
and then other things on my beard. It will be a fabulous image. So hopefully I can chime on. Otherwise, hunt me down like the half dog I am. Count Eric Connor, ERICCONNER.
David Brody, America's favorite Brooklyn boy. Where can you and other Brooklyn boys be found?
Well, Eric, if you could open up the text message I just sent you, I'd really appreciate that. Because this is part of my plug here. Since Eric is showing artwork of everybody else, you can find me on the Brooklyn Boys podcast. Thank you, Eric. That's the logo. Wherever you get your podcasts. And you can always find me here whenever Christian invites me to come on. You can find me Thursday in front of the movie screen watching the Thunderbolts, which I'm very excited about. And
yes, I'm excited too. And we don't have those scheduled yet, so check local listings for when we'll be doing Thunderbolts episodes. Eric will be out of town, so we'll figure it all out sometime in the near future.
And he's got to do Red Guardian.
Oh yeah.
Go on, shoot. So maybe I'll
on your head.
I'll record a special message for you as Red Guardian, even though I haven't seen the film. Yes,
that's all right. It'll be fine. And no, when you go and see Thunderbolts, you have to leave that mask on for the entire time. And I want to see how your eyes are bugged out like a cartoon character. One other programming note for here on Geekscape is that we are going weekly release of 3 episode drops of Star Wars Andor season 2. So we did the first 3 episodes this past Sunday. We'll be doing episodes 4, 5, and 6 on May the 4th in the morning. 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, and Brody will get you on before the end of the season. But there's only 2 more weeks before the end of the season, so one of the next 2 shows we'll make sure that we are able to get Brody on. And if you're not watching that show, you get caught up on those first 3. I think you might want to see the conversation that we had, because it was not as easy to navigate as I wanted to be. I begged our friend Katie to make some time so she could join us. So check that out. But that is all the time we have for now. So we'll be back on all of those other shows. And we'll be back for this show on May 21st talking about Thunderbolts Red. And, until then, if they keep writing them, we'll keep reading them.